Welcome to the pod focusing on the aftermath and recovery from the devastating Palisades fires of January 2025. Journalist Joel Pollack, entrepreneur Oren Ezra, and technology expert Ron Goldschmidt serve up to the moment vital news and information, discuss the ongoing recovery efforts, and introduce us to the individuals and trades who are playing key roles in rebuilding our cherished communities. We're diving into the deep end and learning quickly how we can move forward together. We know the pain because we're living real-time news, stories, resources, and insights on the ongoing recovery effort. Buckle up. We're three homeless guys.
Welcome to Three Homeless Guys, the podcast about the Palisades fire and the rebuilding effort. I'm journalist Joel Pollack here with technology expert Ron Goldschmidt and entrepreneur Oren Ezra. And we are very pleased to be welcomed once again by Joy Chen. She is the former administrator of the pickleball network at the Altadena Country Club. Welcome back. Let's talk. No, we're not talking about pickleball, although we will talk about pickleball. But we're here with Joy because she's also the organizer who put together the Eaton Fire Survivors Network. And we're going to get into a little bit of news, but for those who didn't see your first appearance, Joy, I want to just remind people of how far we've come since then, because since you were on this podcast, I don't know how many months ago it was, you managed to connect with the Palisades community and bring them into what you were doing. And everybody in Pacific Palisades now knows who you are, and I see you all the time on the WhatsApp groups and the different chats among Pacific Palisades residents, and you've really organized our community as well. So we all owe you a great debt of gratitude for leading not only the community in Altadena and Pasadena, the Eaton Fire Survivors, but also providing leadership for people in the Pacific Palisades who are struggling with insurance issues, and that's the topic of today's podcast. But welcome back.
Thank you so much. In fact, actually it was the Three Homeless Guys podcast that first connected me to the Palisades, and so I think that I have you all to thank, and we all have the three of you guys to thank for connecting our communities. I mean, we have so many issues in common, and we are definitely stronger together when we come together and we work on those issues together. So thank you.
I want to just acknowledge one other person who actually introduced you to me, and that's Jennifer Thompson. She's from After the Fire, and she was on this podcast as well. And she and I joke because we're on opposite sides politically. And in fact, we had a nice argument over the whole redistricting issue a few days ago. And we laughed because we know we're never going to convince each other. But the point is that people are coming together and setting aside all these things to rebuild, to help one another. And that's what this is all about. So
yes.
Let me just introduce a bit of news, and then we'll go to Oren and Ron and come back to you. And I know Oren and Ron are going to have a lot of questions about insurance. I've got a little bit of an insurance update as well. But the news, and I know you're going to talk about this, is the reopening of the Altadena Country Club. This was a big news event, actually, in L.A., and I saw some wonderful pictures, I believe it was in the L.A. Times, of people sitting by the pool and having fun on Labor Day weekend and even playing pickleball. And it looked like a scene out of a movie. And in fact, I didn't know this, but the Altadena Country Club was the setting for Mad Men, I think it was, and for some other movies, right? So
yes,
it was almost as if it had come back to life, although the Times noted, and this is true of the Palisades as well, that when you looked around the country club, you saw a lot of empty lots and a lot of devastation. And so while the club itself looked pretty nice, the destruction is still what it was and what it is, and we're still having to sift through all of that. But I want to get to the Altadena Country Club in a minute. I just want to give you my brief insurance update in case you didn't hear about it last week, which is that after a long fight, State Farm finally appears to be working with me, which is very good, very welcome. They started to pay part of my contents claim, not even half of it yet, but they're moving forward, and it's become a more productive relationship than it was before, so I'm tentatively grateful for that, although we still have a long way to go. And I'm hoping I can repair the house and do what needs to be done. So that is at least working so far. I don't know how far it's going to go, but we did seem to have some kind of a breakthrough about 10 days ago. So that's my update
Okay.
in terms of dealing with State Farm, but a lot more to do still. And let's throw it to Oren and Ron and then come back to Joy. And Joy will reintroduce you more fully and then talk about the Altadena Country Club and everything going on in insurance.
Great.
You know, one of the things that struck me from last week's episode, Joel, is when you talked about, you know, how you're basically barely hanging on with this insurance fight. And one of the things that you're talking about is like, you know, you've now moved, you know, you're thinking about, you know, whether you can hang on to the house because of this protracted fight with State Farm, which is basically not giving you the monies owed to you. And I was thinking, you know, offline and now online is like, you know, you are, you know, basically like a pillar in the community. You have a Harvard law degree. Your wife is a Harvard educated and works for the Trump administration. And you guys are like barely hanging on. And I'm thinking like about all the people that are, you know, the senior people, like what chance do they have? Like we have a podcast to talk about all this stuff. Like it's just such a visceral issue. And how many people are like really struggling now to like hang on to their properties given like what the insurers are doing? This is like really, really, you know, drove it home for me. I know about all these stories. I follow them, but like, you know, have somebody like Joel, who's also like, you know, fighting the battle against State Farm specifically, really makes me think about, you know, all the vulnerable people in our communities. And there are a lot.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll just interject for a second on that. I mean, we've collected nearly 500 firsthand accounts of delays and denials from Eaton and Palisades survivors, and they're published on our site as the State Farm Files. And if you just spend 10 minutes, 15 minutes reading them, you will cry. And it is devastating. And the other thing we've done with the State Farm Files is we've mapped those delays and denials to violations of California law. So not only are they devastating, they are illegal. And we'll talk about this more, but we're simply asking for California laws to be enforced.
Joy, maybe like just to level set, you can give us an update on what's been going on since we last spoke. There's been a ton of news, a lot of, I see positive news in the last month or so. And so maybe just to those folks that don't know exactly what's going on the insurance front, maybe you can give us a legal update on what's been happening.
Sure. Was Oren going to introduce himself? But I don't want to step on him.
No, go ahead, Joy. I have something to say, but I can say it's right after. Go ahead.
Okay. So since we were last on the podcast, since I was last here, and we started connecting Eaton and Palisades fire survivors, as Joel said, we have made a lot of progress. So for one thing, we published this, the State Farm Files with nearly 500 firsthand accounts. And that really, I think, that was very important because when we have these illegal delays and denials, insurance companies depend on us being isolated. And through the podcast, when we come together and we start trading these stories and we realize that it's not just me, this is not normal. Laws are being broken, my contracts are being violated. That is the only way that we can start to fight back, you know, against illegal delays and denials and secure the payouts that we have paid for in full over the last 20, 30 years of paying into the system. So after this podcast, we started to organize. It was because of this podcast I got invited into a few Palisades WhatsApp groups. I'm available to be invited into more if other people would like to have me. I don't want to step on toes or be an intruder, but where I'm invited in, I'm happy to join and keep folks updated. So after we published the State Farm Files, we started calling on Lara to investigate State Farm. He appeared on the Pally Strong podcast, and I came on, and in that podcast, he heard for 90 minutes of people pouring out their angst about what was happening. And his response to all of them was, file a complaint, file a complaint, file a complaint. He was on with Deputy Commissioner Tony Signorelli. He also said that he hadn't heard these complaints before, even though we'd had a press conference, we'd shared them with him. And so after that Pally Strong podcast, 2 days later, we sent him the State Farm Files document again, and we demanded that he defer the upcoming emergency rate hike until he'd investigated these complaints.
Can I just ask you a question there?
Yeah.
So he had not heard any complaints about State
Well,
Farm.
that's what he said, but we'd already had a press conference about that 100 days after the fire, which was in April. And not only did he not acknowledge our press conference, he held a press conference on the very same day, at the very same time, to try to step on our press conference, to stamp out the news. But if you go back and look at the news, there were dozens of stories that came out of that, and they were all
It was in
sympathetic
local
to
news.
others.
It was on local TV. It was also in the newspapers
yeah.
locally, and I think it was even in the New York Times. I mean, I think
Yes.
everybody in the country knew about what you were talking about, but he hadn't heard about it.
Exactly. Yeah, we have received extensive coverage. We have been featured in over 350 news stories across print, television, digital. Joel, I mean, you as a media expert know, I mean, I'm a former deputy mayor of LA, so I have been to many sad press conferences that politicians are always having that no media shows up, but we've now had 3 press conferences and they've been extensively covered. I mean, it's just wall to wall. If you come to our website, you can see we have some pictures of just 20 news cameras. I mean, it's really been remarkable. And I think that shows what you alluded to, Joel, earlier, that there's something very visceral about this question of securing the insurance payouts that we paid for that cuts across left and right, Democratic and Republican, that for Americans, if we pay into a system and we spend thousands of dollars a year paying for insurance just in case disaster might strike someday, then if that day happens, we expect our insurance company to be there. We do not like delays and denials. I mean, look at how much support the hot murderer Luigi Mangione got, right? For stalking and murdering a health insurance executive. We're not violent. We're simply taxpayers, policyholders who have done what we were asked to do, pay faithfully into a system with our insurance premiums, with our taxes. And now that we've been devastated, we're simply asking for the laws and our contracts to be enforced. And that has garnered a lot of sympathy among Americans. We've secured over 20,000 signatures among Americans from all over the country to support our calls to ask Commissioner Lara to enforce the law in our contracts. Backing up in May, he appeared on the Pally Strong podcast. He told us that he hadn't heard about any of these complaints. And so 2 days later, we packaged them up. That was on Saturday. On Monday, we packaged them up, sent them to him in a letter. And Tuesday, without acknowledging our letter, he granted the State Farm emergency rate hike. So we had more press, went pretty public on how we felt about that. And when he granted the rate hike that day, I actually happened to be flying to New York, and I was on the airplane, and by the time I landed, I mean, it was just my inbox was packed full of media requests, and I was sitting on the floor at JFK Airport. I had to defer my dinner for an hour and a half. I was sitting there taking all these media interviews. So we have been successful in taking hold of this narrative and bringing, I think, Americans and Californians to our simple call that our regulators enforce our contracts.
So they agreed to raise the rates for State Farm, or to allow State Farm to raise the rates, something like 30%, right? About 34%, I think it was.
That one was the 17% emergency rate hike. That's going to be codified into law this fall. if they have their way. So we can talk about that. All that negative media for Lara was, it was uniformly very negative for him.
And he was out of the
totally
town. He was out of the country, or out of the state at least, for a lot of that time. He was in Hawaii at a conference.
Was he? I don't know. It's hard to keep track of his
he was at some
very
conference.
luxurious travels.
Yeah.
Yeah. So finally, in mid-June, he did launch the market conduct exam that we had demanded. So that was June 12th. He said at the time that he's not in any hurry to complete it. But meanwhile, State Farm is coming in for a permanent rate hike that would make that emergency rate hike permanent and then add more. So this would end up being an across-the-board 30% rate hike. That was supposed to be in October, but now with all the ruckus that we've been raising, it's now pushed to December. So he now has plenty of time to complete the market conduct exam before the rate hike proceeding, which is now scheduled for early December.
Okay, so before we throw it to Oren, who I know had something to ask you or something to say, just to summarize, they've approved these rate hikes tentatively, but they're also doing a market conduct exam, which looks at State Farm's business practices. Is one contingent on the other? I know that's something you were arguing should happen, that State Farm should not be allowed to raise its rates until it had fulfilled its commitments to policyholders and satisfied the state regulators that it had done so.
This is a very, very important question. So John Garamendi, who was the first elected insurance commissioner, he's now a member of Congress from up north, he has come out very clearly to say that Prop 103, which is the law in the late 80s that has, it's a very simple law. We're actually going to have Consumer Watchdog on for a webinar next week to talk about what Prop 103 actually says and what our rights actually are. But what Prop 103 says is that any rate hikes cannot be discriminatory and cannot be unfair. And so what Garamendi and other insurance commissioners have always interpreted that to say is that if a company is breaking the law, it needs to be sanctioned, not be given massive rate hikes. This is just common sense, and it's also the law, and it's also part of Prop 103. There's all sorts of other California codes that says basically companies have to follow the law. California actually has some of the nation's strongest consumer protections. The problem is they're just not being enforced. So there's actually protections around delays and denials, right? A company is supposed to acknowledge any communication from you within 15 days, calendar days. If you submit a receipt or any sort of claim, a company is supposed to either accept, like say, okay, I have to pay this, or deny it with a specific reason and how to cure it within 40 days. And then if they accept it that they have to pay it within 30 days. We know across the board this is just not happening, right? We got the problem of
it's such an important point. I don't want to interrupt you, but the point you just made, they have 15 days to respond, and then when they reject your request, they have to explain why, and then if they accept it, they have to pay. But there's this time constraint. And I hired a public adjuster who works for me and helps negotiate with State Farm. And that was the most important thing he's done so far, is document to State Farm how we had written to them over and over again and never received responses, or received very late responses, and that they were in violation of California regulations and California law. And that has been the main value, actually, of having a public adjuster, because even though I have a law degree and I'm licensed in California, I know nothing about the insurance regulations and the insurance law. Yeah. So a licensed public adjuster, and we've had an episode on public adjusters, went through and said, hey, State Farm's not even answering these letters. That's a violation of the law. And I think that got their attention, actually, which is one of the reasons they're working with us now.
Well, kudos to you, Joel. And that's great that you've hired a public adjuster to do this. But I think what I'm saying, and many of us are saying, is that we shouldn't be in a position that we have to hire public adjusters and give up 10%, hire lawyers and give up 30 to 40%, just to secure our rights. We pay Commissioner Ricardo Lara to secure us our rights. We pay taxes for that. He calls himself the leader of the nation's largest consumer protection agency. His hundreds of people on his staff, that's their job to help us secure our rights because the laws are already on the books. And that's what Commissioner Garamendi and previous commissioners have done, is to enforce the law. Now, what's happening is not only are they not very effectively helping us secure our rights, they're actually pushing through this billion-dollar rate hike and saying, oh, it's a separate process from claims handling. We have to fast track the billion-dollar rate hike, $1.2 billion rate hike this fall, and then we'll maybe consider later whether they are fulfilling their contracts or not. So there's the market conduct exam is totally not time bound. He did say in June it would take months. And meanwhile, he's trying to fast track the market conduct exam. We can get into all the legal maneuvers if you want of the last couple of weeks in the State Farm rate hike proceeding. Basically, I'll just give you a quick thing. If we want to go dive deeper, we can do that. In July, in the cover of darkness, he filed a legal motion to, quote, bifurcate the State Farm rate hike proceeding, to bifurcate, push through the billion-dollar rate hike, fast track that, while bifurcating, separating consideration of rate handling. So we came out strongly against that. That's obviously not in the public interest. Of course, he and State Farm want that. The other thing that he tried to do is to kick the public out of rate hike proceedings completely. And he specifically said that is because of the, quote, large number of LA area wildfire complaints. That means us. And because of the large number of LA wildfire complaints, we pose a personal security threat to Department of Insurance personnel who are arguing the rate hike. And he even brought in Luigi Mangione, comparing us to Luigi Mangione, the murderer of the healthcare insurance CEO in New York, and brought in some other CDC mass murder. And fortunately, the judge threw out all of that nonsense, denied both of those CDI motions supporting State Farm. He threw out both the motion to bifurcate and the motion to kick the public out of the rate hike proceedings. So, we're really grateful for that. But it does go to, it does cause one to question, why would the nation's largest consumer protection agency head be consistently siding with State Farm, which he's acknowledged he receives more complaints about than any other insurance company? And why is he fighting consumers who he's elected to protect? So we're simply hoping that he'll come around and start enforcing the laws, and we have 5 specific ways that he can be doing that.
Oren?
Sorry to be just going
it's
on
good.
and on and on.
I want to ask you
so
more
in
about
the
the
weeds
public
and all
hearing.
this. Sorry, we should be okay.
I want to ask you more, but Oren,
We should have a conversation about this.
Oren, go ahead.
So I have a question. Let's assume, okay, let's like in a place called La La Land, there is a governor and there is the person that is in charge of the insurance. And let's assume that a city over there got burned down, okay? So these two people, I'm assuming, I don't know, I'm not saying something that I know. I'm assuming that in this like fairy tale that I'm telling now, these people are getting paid from someone, okay? So if they're getting paid by someone, and let's assume that they're getting paid from the insurance. I just did like a quick calculation. Let's say that somebody like average mortgage in Palisade is $7,500 a month.
Yeah.
So if you're delaying me, let's say you're delaying Oren in building my house in 5 years now, it means that I need to add another more or less, let's call it $100,000 a year. And
Yeah.
let's say I need another $500,000 to put on my budget to build my house. It means that if the rebuild of my house will take 5 years, I need another $500,000. It means I don't have enough money to build my house. Okay?
Yeah.
Let's say that your end goal is to buy my lot and to build over there, like to do a new Playa Vista in Palisade. So if you're the insurance company, for you it's great because you just held the money, right? You're making like great interest. The
Yeah.
interest rate is very high right now. You're making great interest on your money. So you're
Yeah.
making money. So if you're paying somebody, I don't know who, maybe the governor, maybe the insurance commissioner, you're paying somebody to take this money and hey, let's give them a hard time. And after that, the developer that's going to build this, that buy these lots, is paying you again to make everything you can, so Oren will not build his house again. Okay,
Yeah.
so for me, I'm like, again, after 6 months, I'm not involved in politics. If you would ask me like a few months ago, like before the fire, who is the governor, I maybe would know that it's Governor Newsom. No,
Yeah.
you can ask Ron. You know, I have a lot of. I really love Israeli politics, but I'm like I know nothing about the Palisade. But I'm sitting here and I'm just listening for the last like 6 months. I'm just listening to what people are telling us, to what I'm going through, and I'm just making 1+1. And I'm telling you, it doesn't make sense. Somebody's making a lot of money
Yeah.
over our back. Somebody is trying to hold us back. And I thought about something, Joy, and let me ask you this. My insurance policy is telling me that I have 2 years, and I think my limit, if I'm not mistaken, is 150 or $200,000, something like this. My limit for like additional living.
Yeah.
But if they're holding me back from starting to build, the insurance is holding me back because they're not telling me how much money I have to build my house. I'm questioning, am I after that allowed to sue them for another months or how long it will take? Because I can build in 2 years. If you tell me like day after my fire, Oren, here's your check. You know what? Give me, let's say my limit is, I'm just throwing numbers. Let's say my limit is $1 million. You're telling me, you know what? We don't want to give you $1 million. We're giving you $500,000. That's it. End of story. Go sue us. Finish with me. Let me know where I'm standing, but you're not finishing with me. You're not letting me know where I'm standing. And I'm supposed to carry all these months. So what if I can sue them for me needing to carry until now? What is it, like 7, 8 months? I need to carry these 7, 8 months. They owe me this
Yeah.
money now. So
They
if they
do
owe
owe
me
it to
this
you.
money, I'm sure that they will pay much quicker. And my second question is, like, how come nobody's holding responsible our governor? He's the
Yeah.
one that needs to come and knock on the table. Hey, this is the people that voted for me. Most of Palisade voted for Newsom.
Yeah.
This is the people that voted for me. This is the people that their houses burned down. I want to see resolution. Where is he?
Yeah.
Where is this guy? What is he doing?
Uh, to your first question, it's a terrible situation that you're in. You're absolutely right that your ALE is fixed. That's fixed in your contract. And there's nothing in your contract that says they should exceed the total amount, your policy limits on your ALE. Meantime, it's their delays that are forcing you to continue to go out of pocket. If you hire a lawyer, you can hire a lawyer, but if you look at State Farm specifically, and I'm sure many other companies, I've talked to survivors of other disasters. State Farm has a whole system of delaying you in court. That court case will take minimum 4 years. So don't assume that hiring a lawyer to defend you on these illegal practices, which are illegal, will get you the resolution, unfortunately, because they are very, very good at dragging that out through the courts. They do this full time, right? On your question of Newsom, I will just say that last year in 2024, Newsom had put out a directive, an executive order, directing Laura to expedite rate hikes. And there was this talk about how the rate hike system is too convoluted, which it is. And when Laura in May issued the rate hike over our objections, he specifically said, I'm doing this because the governor asked me to. And he pointed to that executive order. So it would be nice this fall if the governor would issue a new executive order and direct Laura to stop the illegal delays and denials so that the LA area can recover and so that Californians can count on their insurance system. So I think, I'll just put that out there. It's not something that we've been really focusing on right now. We've been focusing so far on Laura. But if there are influential Palisades voices who would like to call on their friends in the governor's office or the governor himself to ask that laws be enforced in California, then I think that, let me know. I would love to coordinate with you. I think that the basic principles here are that what we are proposing, and we have 5 specific actions that are on our website about transparency, following the laws on delays and denials. These are not anti-industry. These are anti-illegal conduct. They are pro-market integrity. And all we're asking for is for the insurance benefits for which we have paid for in full, so that the LA area can recover and so that all Californians can count on their insurance system. The last thing that I would say, Lauren, to what you said is that when you're saying why are companies kind of like acting in an adverse way, what's so fascinating is that 70% of insured Eaton and Palisades fire survivors now say that delays and denials are impeding their entire recovery. Okay, that's a Department of Angels survey that came out this summer. So let me just say it again. For people with insurance in the Eaton and Palisades areas, 70% say that delays and denials are impeding their recovery. So the entire insurance system has shifted from being a safety net to being a roadblock to recovery. But within this 70%, there's massive variation. So some insurers, USAA and AAA, have over 70% positive ratings. I'm lucky I'm with USAA. Look, I'm back in my house after 4 months. But others, State Farm and Fair Plan, have over 80% negative experiences. So why is there such a variation in how whether companies are fulfilling their contracts? This is something that I've been really looking into, and one thing I'll throw out there that we can talk about is it has to do with sort of how these business models have changed. The companies all of these companies started out as mutuals like 100 years ago, which is this idea that like the 4 of us, we're neighbors, we're gonna decide, it's like a beautiful idea, right? Every month we're gonna put in $50 into this pool. And then one day, if Ron's barn burns down, everyone's gonna come along and take care of Ron, right? And then we keep on playing. That's the whole idea of a mutual. This thing is owned by us, it's owned by the policyholders, and we take care of each other. Some companies, including especially State Farm, have moved away from this mutual model. So while it's still technically owned by the policyholders, each policyholder has a tiny minuscule 0.000002% of a share. So it's really impossible for us to organize. And so now we have a class of a management team who sees their own interests as averse to ours. So they're deciding to grow their pot. They have $240 billion in Bloomington, an asset pile that is gigantically large, right? I have a finance MBA from a million years ago. I've been really digging into this. They have a gigantic asset pile that they are growing and growing and growing. They could pay us. They could pay out Joel. They could fulfill their contracts to Joel. They just choose not to. Yeah. And so this is sort of an evolution away from this original, it's still technically structured as a mutual, but for that reason, there is no SEC oversight. I mean, what $240 billion company has no federal oversight?
That's incredible.
And it's just regulated by all these state regulators. All these, like what kind of people run for insurance commissioners? It's not like, the most
Well, I want to get to
glamorous
that
or most
question in a
amazing
second,
job.
but Bloomington, Illinois, we mentioned in a previous broadcast, and I at one point became so desperate I started calling friends in Illinois where I grew up and saying, "Do you know anyone in Bloomington who knows someone at State Farm?" And I think the issue that you're describing about this management level, we could even get into that a little bit further. I think the common experience of State Farm clients in the Palisades is that you've had these adjusters to deal with who are parachuted in and then rotated constantly as part of a delaying tactic, but their job is to minimize the cost to the company, not
Yes.
to help get you on your feet. And what I wanted to do was to talk to someone senior at State Farm, and I said to the broker who sold me the policy, or the person who inherited that business because my first broker retired, I said, nobody at any point has sat down with my family and said, what are we looking at here? What are your goals? How do we get this big picture right? Where are we going with this? That would have been so helpful to get us all on the same page. Instead, it was the question Ron and I have talked about week after week, which is, oh, your list is inaccurate. You didn't specify which designers your wife bought from when she put these clothing items in her closet, and there's an error on a price tag, or do you have the receipt for this, or what color was your underwear? So they're nickel and diming these things instead of looking at the bigger picture. And it's so frustrating, this business model. And the other thing you said, though, I want to just come back to the ALE, the living expenses that the insurance company provides. Oren, I heard, I believe from my public adjuster, and I don't want to misquote him, but he said that there are some conditions under which you can get the ALE for longer than your actual insured period, and it has to do with these kinds of delays, and it also has to do with the living conditions in the community. Our community is not really inhabitable yet, and the period you have could be 2 years, let's say, or a year, 2 years, whatever, or a certain dollar amount limit. But apparently there are some conditions. You might want to look into this. There are some conditions that would require the company to continue paying until everything is sorted out. They can't just leave
I
it.
don't know about that. That would be awesome. Maybe, I would love to know more if you get more
Yeah, I
information.
mean, we should maybe have another adjuster on to talk about that, because
Yeah.
he was sort of incredulous at these delays and said, they're just going to have to pay over the 2 years because they're the cause of this delay. And there's some condition under which they have to pay an extra year or something. I mean, maybe
I've
we
seen
should.
policies in State Farm where they extend from 24 months to 36 months the ALE. However, the absolute limit of what they pay out does not change. So if you
Yeah,
use
yeah,
that
yeah.
over 2
That's true.
years, you're out of it. But I do have a question to piggyback on both Joel's point and Oren's point, which is, we've talked about the State Farm model for ad nauseum here, which has been McKinsey to death, and everybody knows
Yeah.
what it is, which is delay tactics,
Right.
hang on to the money as much as possible, and make people either bleed out
Yeah.
and settle for less than they deserve, or come to some conclusion at some point in the future after you've hung on to the money for as long as possible, netting hundreds of millions of dollars on these billions of dollars of claims.
Correct.
And I think in that model, there's also like this legal byline, which is like, we'll get sued at the end for something, it will
Yeah.
pay out something, and therefore, but the payout of what we had to pay out is going to be less than that legal proceeding. I believe, and this is just my prediction, what they're doing here is actually like, from a math perspective, is going to end up being wrong for State Farm. Because I think like what your efforts, Joy, and what you're doing, putting all of these heads together in terms of like fighting this battle, is creating a network effect where people are going to bandy together and go after State Farm for a lot of different things that individuals don't go after in. If you have like one area of disaster somewhere and there's like 5 houses affected, that State Farm is happy to play that math. In this case, I believe that because of the efforts of things that you're doing, they're going to have massive legal problems down the road. And I'm not talking just about bad faith claims, but I'm also talking about like second and third order effects of what's happening. Things like the ALE that Oren is talking about. People are going to lose their homes, and guess if you drag me out, like we've seen dozens of these examples. If you drag me out and made me lose my home because you've dragged me out, yet you'll still owe me my policy. People are going to go after them for that. And I think as a group, the amazing things that you're doing is like putting all these like connectors together that they rely on for us not to have in normal time.
Correct.
And I think down the road, this is going to create a massive legal problem for them. And I would just love to get your thoughts on like, not because in their bucket of exposure is like just their limits, basically. I think like what you're doing here and like what the community is doing and running into very powerful communities and very vocal communities is going to end up having a knock-on effect of like them having a much larger exposure than the limits of what they're exposed to currently in their policies. What do you think about that, Joy?
I think that's really, really interesting, Ron. I hope so. I mean, the thing is that they depend, for these illegal delays and denials, they depend on us just being like gigantic State Farm and each one of us. We're isolated. Survivors have always been isolated all around the country. But as you point out, here we are in LA, the biggest media market in the world. Some of us have been around the block in media. We know how to write a press release. We know how to put together a press conference. And we know how to put together a letter. We understand our rights. And so it's only when we can come together that we can start to level the playing field. And that's what I'm hoping that we do. And Ron, I think that what you're talking about as those second and third order legal effects, to be honest, I haven't even thought about that. I've been just so focused on sort of the immediate day, tactically what to do next. But it is interesting to sit back here and think about the big picture here. I think there's also PR impacts. I think by now we've said over and over and over in the media the fact that State Farm's under investigation, that our commissioner has acknowledged that he receives more complaints about State Farm than any other company. State Farm is the insurance company doing the most harm to Californians. I think that more and more people are hearing that. I hear around the country, relatives and friends that I talked about that, they're like, oh yeah, I heard about something like that. State Farm is really bad, right? I'm not going to go with State Farm. So I think that there will be impacts, second and third order impacts also to their business, when all we're doing is shining a light on what's happening with us. And to that end, I would just say that Assemblymember Harabedian and we had a press conference last week where we brought together LA area legislators, including Jackie Irwin from the Palisades. And we've asked for these 5 simple demands, which we can talk about if you want. But the most important thing is that they're now going around to insurance committee members all around California in the legislature, and many of them have no idea what's going on with us. They're like, oh yeah, the LA fires, is that still happening? Are people still suffering? So what we need right now is we need stories. We need stories like, 100 words, 200 words of what is happening in 5 categories. Your ALE, are you having to fight for your ALE? Is your ALA being cut off? 2, Fair Plan. Has Fair Plan denied your smoke damage claim? That is illegal. Fair Plan is supposed to pay for its smoke damage claims. 3, is your insurer hiding your loss estimates? Insurers are fraudulently lowering the loss estimates. You know how they send an adjuster or a vendor to your house and you're not allowed to see that original loss estimate? That's illegal. It is your right to see that loss estimate. Are those being hidden from you? 4, have you filed a CDI complaint and nothing has happened? Because CDI keeps on saying, oh, we're resolving all the complaints successfully. And 5, is your insurer taking more than 15 days to respond? All of those questions, and I'm going to give you guys a link to put in the show notes. If anybody is having any of those problems, it will be so helpful if you just write out a little thing. And then for some of them, I might come back and just do a quick Zoom interview. And we might just we need to put together a video. We need to show the world what's really happening. Otherwise, they assume that everything's hunky-dory.
That assumption is so funny. I was on the phone with a Southwest ticket agent who was helping me figure out some problem with some air tickets. And she was in San Antonio, and I mentioned I was from Palisades, and we got to talking about the fires. and this Southwest ticket agent said to me, "Oh, but I heard you guys had some payout, like some big pot of money, like you got some money." And I'm like, "We didn't get any money." Like, if you had insurance, maybe you got money. We're like fighting the insurance companies. And she goes, "Oh, I heard on the news." I think what they thought about was fire aid. Like, they heard stories about fire aid, and they thought,
Oh.
so, yes, we need those stories. And the last point you made was about the 15-day requirement. And I mentioned that earlier in the show. State Farm wasn't even responding. And I was CC'd on the emails that my public adjuster was sending, and he just grew increasingly exasperated and was quoting the California code to them, saying, "You have to respond to this." And the thing that really got me going in terms of ALE was that the fourth adjuster I had for State Farm, who seemed at least to be working with us a little bit, he talked to my public adjuster and said, "By the way, we're going to cut off ALE at some point, and then they have 35 days to," and it was like, wait, you're going to lose ALE in 35 days? I had to put my home on the market because State Farm, it sounded like, was going to arbitrarily decide when to cut us off, regardless of the conditions, and because of the delays that they had caused. And then I thought, well, I have to have the house on the market now because I'm not going to be able to sell it in 35 days if they decide that I don't ALE anymore. And so that's really what got me going. And the public adjuster has written to them and said, "You have to back off that, whatever spurred you to make that threat. That's, you guys have to stop that." So we need these stories because I think I speak for Ron when I say this. We want the insurance companies to be able to do business in California. We're not
Definitely
complaining. We want them to be able to do business. We might even want them to be able to raise their rates. But the flip side is you have to provide a service. And that's all we're really asking. And Ron and Oren have had the same problems or worse than I've had. And
sorry.
It's outrageous.
Joy, there was a kind of like pertinent case ruling in the last few days, and I just wanted you to update everybody on that. And I saw a story in the LA Times just about State Farm's conduct. Can you give us the highlights?
Right. Well, it's really these two issues for survivors. Actually, the reason why we're even talking about the State Farm rate proceeding now is because of a Palisadian named Merritt David Ferrin. And what happened was that originally a State Farm permanent rate hike proceeding was scheduled for October. And then Merritt, who's a retired corporate lawyer, he realized that, hey, any member of the public can be an intervener. This is part of our rights under Prop 103. So he said, hey, I want to be an intervener, and I want to be able to speak and offer comment because I want State Farm's conduct to be examined before a rate hike. So he filed in May, and of course CDI and State Farm were like, no! So they opposed Merritt's petition to be an intervener. In June, Merritt, the judge, said, okay, Merritt can be an intervener. So we're all pleased about that. And then Merritt in July says, okay, now I need to do some discovery. And this might take a while, right? So, so that is when CDI came in very sneakily and said, all right, we'll let you do the discovery, but in order to allow Merritt time to do discovery, we propose the proceeding be bifurcated. So Merritt, market conduct exam, all that stuff can happen on its own timeline, but we'll just move forward quickly on the rate hike proceeding. And so that's why it was like a very dangerous thing. If it weren't for this whole Merritt's intervening, then we wouldn't even had all this activity this summer. This summer would just be waiting around for the rate hike proceeding in October. But because that happened, there was all this flurry of activity. And so in the dead of summer, I was on vacation. CDI files this petition for the bifurcation. So we're not, as survivors, I'm not a lawyer, EFSN we're not lawyers. So I wrote a public letter, I wrote an op-ed to just shine a light on what's going on, saying we oppose this bifurcation because, if a company is breaking the law, it should be sanctioned, not given a billion-dollar rate hike. So this argues in favor of a unified proceeding. So that's what's been happening this summer. The bifurcation was denied. and the CDI's like totally off the wall motion to kick the public out of the rates proceedings entirely, that was also denied.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, that was crazy, and they compared you
Yeah.
to Luigi Mangione, and just offensive. I mean, people who are just trying to get what they have owed to them. Uh, let's talk about next year. We're not trying to be a political show, but we do need to talk about the elections next year because it is our first opportunity to be heard. And Ricardo Lara is no longer going to be the insurance commissioner. He's termed out. I think he wants to run for LA County supervisor or something like that. Hilda Solis, I think, might leave LA County and run for Congress in the new districts. There are going to be lots of this kind of musical chairs going on, but the Office of California Insurance Commissioner is going to be open, an open seat. And Ben Allen, who is our termed out state senator, may run. He's talked about possibly running. Some people have talked about you running. Are you interested in running for California Insurance Commissioner?
No,
Okay.
no. I'm really honestly focused right now on getting Eaton and Palisades survivors back home.
So who should
Whether
we
it's
find
smoke
to run
damage.
for this position? We got to find
I
somebody.
don't know. I was reached out to by one candidate who's running. I didn't really pay much attention to him. I think he's kind of a small, you know, candidate, and I just had someone else, one of our volunteers, say, "Okay, why don't you go meet with him?" Um, I don't know. I haven't, to be honest, really looked into who's running. I have heard that Ben Allen might run. I don't really know anything beyond that. But when there are candidates who step forward, I would hope that we ask for some basic things like, do you support enforcing the laws of California and things like that. So I think that we should, basically ask them to make certain promises when they do step forward, but I don't know who they are. One thing that I would ask, since you guys are all in the Palisades and you guys have so many assets around Hollywood that we don't have, specifically on State Farm, is, and all insurance companies, is I wonder if we might get some celebrities to help us champion our cause of securing the billions of dollars in unpaid insurance payouts. Generally, on that top line, if there are any celebrities who would like to support survivors, this is something that they can support that I think all Americans would support. So I think it's not going to be a controversial thing. It's just more of sort of getting the message out. And then specifically on State Farm has spokespeople that they pay millions of dollars a year to. We could certainly argue that that's money that's owed to us. And if there's celebrities like Caitlin Clark, Patrick Mahomes,
Mahomes' name always comes up because he's on all the commercials.
yeah, so these people, I mean, I don't know anything about Caitlin Clark, but she seems to be an awesome person. My teenage girls love her. But just to let them know that, do you know that you are representing this company that is devastating the recovery, the LA recovery? And I don't know, I mean, just to let their, maybe their agents are friends of your friends. The other thing is I heard that State Farm's chairman of the board might be a Palisadian. So I just wonder if there are, I've been sort of like focusing on the political side, but whether it's doing some quiet working behind the scenes with State Farm's board and agents to their celebrity spokespeople, it would be incredible if, I mean, somebody like a Caitlin Clark, I'm sure she has, like, every big company would love to sponsor her. Like, is it like totally out of the realm? I don't know, Joel, you're a lawyer, right? Would it be totally out of the realm to turn where those spokespeople?
Well, you could try. I mean, most of them are going to stick with their sponsorship agreements, but
Yeah.
it's not impossible. We do also have some celebrities who are starting to speak out. I mean, Spencer Pratt has been very vocal. I don't always see the world the way he does, but he's very vocal. We're going to try to have him on the show as soon as we can. And I want to just wrap up in the couple minutes we have remaining by repeating your appeal. If people have ideas about celebrities who speak out, or people have networks and connections, I think that's where we need to go next. I mean, I've certainly had that thought, which is why I reached out to friends in Bloomington, Illinois, trying to get the State Farm executive to talk to me. Um, we have to do that. I think it has to go exactly where you've pointed us, which is we need to start getting the big picture here. We can't be dealt with in this way, in this arm's
Yeah.
length way, like as if we're Luigi Mangione or someone else. I mean, it's insulting, but also it just doesn't help anybody.
Yeah. Okay. So then, putting aside State Farm, if we just could find some celebrities that'll champion our cause of pay us what they owe us, so that LA survivors can recover.
Yeah.
That'd be a
Well,
great
a lot of
message.
people are watching and listening, and we hope that you'll contact us. And I know I'll repeat it again when we close out, but our email is pod@threehomelessguys.com. So please reach out. And, we're on social media, or I'm on social media, at Joel Pollack on X is where you can usually find me. You can send me an instant message or whatever. But we really want to make it clear that this is the crunch time for a lot of people. And as you pointed out, and as Ron pointed out, and Oren, I know, would say he has to drop quickly, but as Oren, I know, would say as well, the insurance factor is the limiting factor for most people right now. It's make or break because of insurance policies that we have already paid for. And there isn't some big pot of federal money or state money or any of that. There's just the private insurance policies that we paid for. And when people are getting quotes from their insurance companies, we've talked about this as well, the construction costs that State Farm and other companies are estimating are ridiculously low, and they're not really getting anybody back to a position where they can rebuild. That is the limiting factor. And I said to a friend, I may have told this story before, but I said to a friend who was complaining about Mayor Karen Bass because she was saying the insurance companies have to start coming to the table. I've had a lot of criticisms of Mayor Bass, but my response to my friend was, actually, she's right. She's exactly right that it is the insurance issue now that is holding everything back. It's not like she's trying to just kind of say that this isn't her fault, it's the insurance company's fault. I mean, that's a separate issue, what the city did or didn't do. But to say now that the insurance companies are the limiting factor is correct. She's actually right.
Yeah.
And we need to get that obstacle behind us if we're going to move forward.
Can I just finally just end by saying that if anybody is interested in keeping up with our insurance fight, I really welcome you to join us. Just go to efsurvivors.net and click join the network. And we warmly welcome all Palisadians. Every single thing that we're doing to fight for is for both Eaton and Palisades survivors. So please join us at efsurvivors.net. And thank you so much to the three homeless guys. Our collaboration started, Eaton and Palisades Fire collaboration started on the Three Homeless Guys podcast. And so I have a great love for you guys, and looking forward to more collaboration. We've got a lot to do.
So thank you so much. And efsurvivors.net. And I would just add that we also have listeners outside of our communities, people who just listen in because they're interested in the subject.
Join us.
And you're doing an incredible job of getting the word out and getting media coverage. So please sign up for that, even if you're not a fire victim or survivor, if you just want to stay abreast of what's happening, because Joy and the residents that she's organizing are doing an incredible job, and maybe changing things for the rest of America as well, because as we've learned, there are people suffering from similar mistreatment in other disaster areas like North Carolina, South Carolina, other areas, Texas. So this is important. This is a really important change in terms of the relationship between consumers and insurance companies. All right, so with that, Joy Chen of the Eaton Fire Survivors Network, thank you so much for joining us once again. Thanks to Oren Ezra, thanks to Ron Goldschmidt, and from myself, Joel Pollack. This is Three Homeless Guys saying, until next time, stay strong.
Bye.
Okay, Ron, I think we can drop. Ron, how does it work, Ron, when Oren is off? We just. I think Joy, as long as it says you're 99% uploaded or completely uploaded,
Yeah.
I think it's okay. Okay, so I think you can.
Yeah, we'll cut the rest, and we're good.
Okay, thanks so much, Joy. I
Thank you
really
so
appreciate
much.
it.
Good to
Okay.
be with you.
Thank
You
you,
too.
Joy.
Let's stay in
Bye.
touch.
All the best.
Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, Ron.
All right, bye.
Thanks for listening to Three Homeless Guys. If this episode hit home, please subscribe to our channel. Check out 3homelessguys.com for RSS feeds to your favorite streaming service. Follow us on social and share this with a friend who needs to hear it. Drop us a review or shoot us a message at pod@3homelessguys.com. We'd love to hear from you. Stay strong, and we'll catch you next time.